Hey, there you are.
Hey,
Cool.
how you doing?
Good. How are
Good.
you?
Nice to can't really say meet you, but see you.
I know what you mean. Um, so actually, first things first, I think you know my name, but I don't know
Yeah,
yours.
yeah. So I'm Joshua,
Okay.
Josh, either or.
Well, maybe I did see that. That sounds familiar.
I
But there's a lot of good.
I don't put it out on my on this Instagram, but I don't it's no sort of secret either. So
All right, cool. Um, let me just get a couple things sorted here. All right. I just sat down, so I'm just trying to make sure everything's all set.
yeah, yeah, no worries.
All right. Um, I've got a road right behind me on the other side of this wall. So if that gets loud, let me know, and I can move somewhere else.
Yeah, no problem. So far so good, and we just had some construction finish up outside the house, so we should be good here unless a baby walks in the room.
All right, cool.
Well, hey,
Congratulations, by the way.
thank
That's super
you.
exciting.
Yeah, yeah, and I know you're not far off on yours, so I hope everything goes well
Correct.
with that.
Yeah, number three. It's exciting.
Oh, okay. So nice. Yeah, we just had number two, so we're
Cool.
we're into the first time for having multiple. So
Good deal. Let me do something. There we go. These lights are a little harsh, so I was just trying to knock it down a bit. So what's
yeah, no worries.
up, man?
Well, I stumbled upon your Instagram a bit ago and just started checking out your posts, and I thought there were a few themes and the things that you hit on that really resonated with me. Obviously, you're an outspoken Christian too, so um, in this, I'm gonna say community a lot, but I think there's anytime you talk about the Second Amendment or preparedness, I think I have mixed feelings about the word community, but I'll just say community. So, in this community, finding somebody who's an outspoken Christian, somebody who's openly biblical, not just nominally Christian, I think is a little bit more of a rarity, or at least not as common. So, I thought that was pretty cool, and yeah, we got chatting, and I thought might be a good opportunity to get to talk about some things, have a discussion on some of the topics that get thrown out there often, but I think they're thrown out and they're discussed by people who either shoot or have some sort of full-time job involved in this stuff. And there's a whole lot less kind of, average Joes doing these things, or at least putting out content, not so much consuming the content. So
Right.
yeah, I don't know. I just thought we could have a conversation. I got a few ideas in mind. If anything comes up that you want to talk about, feel free to rabbit trail. I
No,
love rabbit trails.
cool. I
Um,
like it. I appreciate what you said. I do try to be outspoken. Um, I know some people don't because they don't want to be too pushy. They don't want to, you know, have people feel like they're shoving it down their throats, but that's not at all what I'm trying to do. I mean, my beliefs are foundational to who I am as a person. So sharing that is just the top priority naturally. It's not like I'm trying to instill beliefs on somebody else, with some sort of recruitment program. It's just, this is who I am. And these are the principles that are important to me. And um, the scripture that has formed those. So it's just natural for me that it comes out. And I've always been kind of a big mouth when it comes to what I believe. So it's kind of natural for that progression of things. But yeah, I do see the list here. I got it pulled up that you had some topics to talk about.
yeah, that's
I like,
my own code too, so I hope that made sense. I also hope you could actually read it.
yeah, no, it looks good. Um, ground level, Second Amendment, and preparedness.
Mind if I
Uh,
explain what I mean by that?
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so what I kind of alluded to earlier was, let's see if I can make this make sense without getting too far into other things. I remember watching a video a while back from Mike Jones, Garen Thumb, and I love all of his stuff. I watch all of his stuff. He was talking about different ballistic helmets and comparing them the bump helmets. And it was cool. Like, I ate it up. I think I was driving, and so I listened to it more than watched it. But anyway, he's breaking down costs and considerations for each one, and he talks about one of the ballistic helmets, and obviously the price is what you would expect for a good brand new ballistic helmet. It's several $1,000s. And just reading the comments on a video like that, you know, you just see a lot of people in there taking it for granted. Like, oh yeah, of course, you know, you need this. Like, you should be buying this. What are you doing if you don't have one of these? Right. So that was like an early alarm bell for me. And it kind of turned me on thinking a little bit more about a lot of the content that you can consume in the Second Amendment space. Just realizing that fact of the matter is most people don't have a several $1,000 discretionary budget. Not to say that you can't get there. But, you know, I think there is there is something to be said for the average person. I mean, if you just want to look at statistics, you take the median income in America, there's not enough discretionary money in that budget to kit yourself out like a tier 1 operator.
Right. Right. Yeah, it definitely gets expensive. And that's where you end up hitting that hole. And maybe this is a topic for later before we get too deep into it. But that's where you get to the whole discussion about budget versus quality of gear. There's some people who are out there that are all about like the Gucci, got to have the best of the best and get things, you know, that buy once, cry once mentality, which I appreciate. But like you're saying, there's also the matter of not everybody can afford that. So that is something that I try to focus on a lot. It's like, what is good enough, you know? And I don't want to spend more money than I need to because there's a lot of bases to cover, especially on something like a ballistic helmet. Might never actually come into, hopefully not ever comes into something that needs to be utilized. But a lot of stuff like food and savings are higher on that priority list. So
yeah, I think what you just said there, you said priority list. I think that's something that, and I'll include myself in this. It's very easy to lose track. It's easy to lose track of that. Like, you'll see someone with level 4 plates, or you'll see someone who, you know, is talking about how they're Geisley or Noveske or whatever brand AR they have, like they can trust their life to it. And it's like, that's awesome. Quality gear is great. But I think, you know, whether it's training or equipment, I think for the average person, if anything, you need to understand your priorities even more because of that limited resource, time and money. Yeah. So it's something that I've been thinking a lot more about, and I'm just pleased to see other people putting out content. Again, it's not that you want to compromise. Like you said, there's a buy once, cry once mentality. That's very sound wisdom. You know, cheap Chinesium abounds, and life-saving gear is important. But yeah, I think the other thing too that really stood out to me is you had that video where you talk about the gun culture 3.0 as like a room that you can walk into, right?
Oh yeah.
And I was like practically saying yes out loud the whole time.
Yeah. So that was a fun concept I came up with. I got to give credit where credit's due. My buddy, I won't say his name on here, but one of my closest friends, he came up with the idea of using the Simpsons meme of the guy walking in and seeing everything and turning around and walking right back out. And I was like, yeah, I got to put that in there. So I put that on. Shane says as he stares at his Geisley rifle, working dry fire. I saw Caleb do earlier today.
Nothing wrong with buying quality if you can. That's the goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
You know, I think for me, I'll try to be real quick with this because I know we both like to talk, so I don't want to talk over you too much. But with training, you know, as I have more kids and I get busier in the rest of my life, I start to think more about the priorities, not just with gear, but with how you spend your time. And I think that's another thing that it's really important to understand where your priorities should be in time. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think you're right. That's been a passion of mine for probably the last 2 years, I would say. And I've explained it to some people as trying to hit as many birds with one stone as possible. So, or or I also refer to it as checking off boxes. So there's things that I need to accomplish, right? I need to accomplish entertainment. I need to accomplish fulfilling responsibilities. I need to accomplish spending time with my kids, right? So there are certain ways of spending time that can check off one of those boxes at a time, or there's other things that can check off multiple of those boxes at a time. So one of the developments that we made recently was we don't have a TV in our house anymore. Like we have iPads and laptops and computers and phones and stuff like that. So we still have probably way too many screens. But the fact is we don't have this massive temptation that just kind of sucks you in and only checks off one of those boxes, really. Entertainment, most of the time that you're on a screen, especially if it's a long form piece of cinematic production, you get that one box checked off, entertainment. And I was like, well, what if I can spend that time doing something that is entertaining, that I can do with my kids, that I can learn and that I can provide for my family? So like we replaced a lot of that with the homesteading side of things. So I learned, hey, I can be entertained taking care of chickens or building a chicken coop. I can be entertained tilling a garden or planting vegetables, you know? And at the same time I'm doing that, I'm learning a valuable skill, spending time with my kids. And that just, I really haven't missed it. I haven't missed the entertainment side of things. That's just purely cinematic. And that's a big thing for me to say because I'm used to be a huge Marvel guy, huge into, you know, Lord of the Rings and all these fantasy. I loved cinematography, right? So I resonate with what you're saying, that time is the most foundational thing that we have that should be prioritized the most.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I think screens are probably one of the hardest things to not waste time on right now. It's brutal. Yeah, but it really is. It's hard seeing because I think with all this stuff, whether it's preparedness or Second Amendment, especially for guys, right? Like tractors are cool to me too. You know, I don't know, baling hay is something that I find cool too. I've never done it. So seeing a lot of these things that people put out, like I've been watching a lot of competitive shooters and trying to learn more about that side of thing. And it's hard because I would love to spend my entire year's worth of ammo on like a super weekend training session.
Yeah.
But that's just not going to do me much good for my life. Like it could be good for somebody, but you know, not so much for me. So even that, like if you're like, I saw you put up your video of dry fire, which reminded me I got to work dry fire from concealment more. You know, it's like you can do that and you can get really, really good with your handling by spending 15 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, even doing that.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas there's other things
probably better than going to a league or doing stuff like that. If that's all you're doing, you know, is just going to the league. Like I was guilty of that for a while. I went to a league for like a couple months every week and I wasn't doing the dry fire in between. I was just, you know, too busy. And it was like, I guarantee you I would be a much better shooter at the end of these 2 months if I was dry firing for 15 minutes a day rather than actually shooting a course once a week, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a guy out there, I don't know his Instagram. I saw a post by him and he was a USPSA shooter. And I don't know if he was just busy or what, running an experiment, what the deal was, but he was basically only dry fire and then shooting matches and like watching his performance grow. And that's not to say that like you should never go and shoot live fire. I'm not trying to say that, but just, I think especially for normal people, like we have to make a lot of tough either or decisions. Like I would love to go get fully kitted out and go on a weekend hike with my buddies at night. But then I can't work out that night, or I can't read my Bible that night, or I can't, you know, it's a lot of either ors because that limited commodity of time, you know, you're sacrificing something.
Right. Yeah. And that's where that priority list comes back in, right? Like this is part of what I was talking about with the step one video for ideology, is that a lot of people don't even have this sorted out, like a tiered system or a hierarchy of values where they're like, okay, this is the most important. When I fulfill that responsibility, I can spend time on this, and so on and so forth. And it's like, you need to think about that stuff. You really do, because otherwise, in a couple months, yeah, you're going to, like you said, have spent your entire year's worth of ammo, just training away, thinking you're doing something good. You're realizing that you didn't spend time doing what you needed to be doing in other areas, either with your family or other responsibilities, like you mentioned. And that's why I was kind of harping a little bit on you need to figure out your ideology, because you're either not going to prioritize things correctly, or you're going to burn out and be like, why am I doing this? Like, I've seen so many people do that, where they get started and they're really passionate about it at first. It's usually instigated by a fear or a current event or something. And then as soon as that wears off, they don't have the ideology sorted out, the conviction as to why they're doing what they're doing, which comes with priorities. So it just kind of fades away. And to them, it doesn't seem like it's as high of a priority because they haven't put that thought into it. Or for some people, maybe they have. There are other people who have, other circumstances that I don't have that might outweigh the training aspect of things. So I don't want to disregard that either. But that's the point, is getting the ideology figured out so you can know what to prioritize and spend your time and your money on.
Yeah, totally. I mean, priorities too, in general, like forget about prepping or guns. I mean, I think it's very, very easy to just kind of walk through life. If I can segue a little bit here, not that we can come back to anything as far as I'm concerned. But again, one of the things with your page that really stood out to me, and I watched that video. You were talking about having foundational principles, and I think that's important. That's important for everything, obviously, and I'm sure you would agree. But what I'm seeing is more and more things like the Overton window. I don't know how often you use that phrase, but it's one I'm starting to love more. The Overton window of what's acceptable on the internet is changing, and I'm not saying that morally people are becoming better, but I think there are a lot of people putting out morally good things for men to consume, and a lot of trash, but also good things. You're seeing a lot more people talk about the evils of pornography, wasting your youth, the importance of having a good understanding of manhood. And those things are great, but if there's no foundation of that, you're kind of just going to collect. It's noise. It might be right or wrong. Who knows? It's something that's being put out there. Do you accept it or not? So I think, if I could ask you how you would answer this, in the Second Amendment preparedness space, what distinguishes you as a Christian from, say, Buddhist, Muslim, atheist, etc.? Well,
I would say my view is true. the simplest thing. But no, what distinguishes me? I don't know. There's definitely some people out there doing what I'm doing, with kind of a different vein. But I think I view this as just a fulfillment of my responsibilities. Like you mentioned, back when I first started getting into having social media and stuff like that, I saw some of these problems socially coming for a long time. So I saw some of the, far left ideologies creeping in, and I was always kind of railing about those things, but I felt super alone. Like you're mentioning, it's getting to be more common now to talk about those things and to stand on certain principles, but back then it really wasn't. And that's where I was like, man, where are all the men standing up and talking about this stuff? So thankfully, some people started up. Like I remember when the Art of Manliness started up and when the Order of Man started up. And actually my first blog that I really started doing stuff on was called Bringing Manly Back. And had a bit of following on that, and it kind of didn't end up doing much with that. But that was where I was like, we need to have strong men standing up and standing for these principles. And I think the reason that Christians have kind of failed in that regard is because it was so unpopular for that amount of time. Was like people were just like, okay, like we get it, just be quiet, okay, and you're being hateful towards these people, or you're being hateful towards those people. And now, even though the views have polarized, it seems like since the views have polarized, you have more people willing to be vocal around you on your side, so it doesn't feel as lonely. And it's cool to see other big influential people coming out and standing in those positions as well. So I really like John Lovell from Warrior Poet Society and people like that who are, like you said, standing on those principles. As far as I'm still thinking about that question, what distinguishes me from those people? I mean, obviously an ideological worldview, foundational difference, which is just I believe Christianity is the one true religion, and anything else is eventually, once you boil it down far enough, you're standing on a faulty foundation. So in the gun space specifically, I realized, like, I got to be clear about this stuff, because there was people that were in the gun space that I was like, I need to distinguish myself from these people, right? So there was people who are in the gun space who are really just like purely anarchists, just have a complete disdain for authority. Some people that really just like violence. And even some individuals really close to me who spent a lot of time in the military even mentioned, like, veterans and guys who they served with are not, without that foundation, they are not people that they would trust if crap hit the fan, as they, so to speak. So because lacking that foundation, they might have the same end view that you do, Second Amendment or whatever, but they're going to be willing to do a lot more when push comes to shove than a Christian would, morally be able to go along. So I don't know if that answers your question. Just kind of.
Well, it does. I think at the end there, I think what you said about differences in what you're willing to do. And, even talking about, like, I've seen the whole anarchist thing come out. It's like they're coming out of the woodwork right now. As world governments seem to just get bigger and bigger and more corrupt, it's like the polar opposite gets more vocal. But yeah, that's kind of exactly, what I think about oftentimes is the foundation or the worldview. Some of these things might lead to similar places, but then I think of it like a stress test, right? If everyone talks about if things fell apart. So whether that's a natural disaster or whatever situation you want to imagine, people are going to be put in difficult and extreme situations. And I think as a Christian, we've been talking about priorities a bit. I think you even just said priority. I don't know how you feel about all these little ifs, ands, and buts in situations, but I often think about, for myself as a Christian, my biggest priority is actually not to live. My biggest priority is to glorify God. That's why I exist. And to do that, one of the things that I do is protect the sanctity of life. And that gets into responsibilities in your family, in your community, all those things. But, at the end of the day, I've seen some people talk about, what are you going to do when, when people are starving and you get to kill your neighbor to get his food or whatever. There's also a quote from it was a book about there was Poland, one of the Eastern European countries during the whole Soviet control era, where the communists were just starving people basically. And the quote was that all the good people starve first. And I look at that as a Christian, and that's awful to think, but there's a big part of me that says, well, so be it. If that's what it takes. Because my perspective is not based primarily on this earth. That's certainly important to me, and I'm sure to you, obviously, we're people who are involved in this kind of stuff. So, we care about people not dying and the protection of life. I care about my family, but there are certain things that, priorities that supersede some of the other priorities that I think people would have in these environments.
Yeah, and you even hear it in jokes. I do like what you said about the main purpose, the highest priority is to glorify God, because that's true, right? Biblically, that's a foundational principle, and it's one of, I don't know what flavor of Christianity you are, but it's one of the five solas. So sola Deo Gloria is the glory is God's alone, or soli Deo Gloria, and we harp on the five solas a lot, because it's kind of like a litmus test for all these different topics and discussions that we have about principles and ideologies and beliefs and that sort of thing. So you're right. Even in everything goes sideways type of a situation, those principles are still my core principles, and that's not going to change based on circumstance. So it does become a harder topic to think about when you have those core values, because you can't just rely on, and I started this by saying, you hear people joke about, well, some of those people, they're preppers and they're hoarders and they keep all this stuff, but they don't have firearms. Well, they're just hoarding that stuff for me, and it's like, okay, well, actually, no. That's not how my worldview works. Now, the discussion can go deeper than that. There is some opportunity there. If you don't have food, but you have protective equipment, and they have food, but they don't have protective equipment, you can have mutually beneficial relationships. But yeah, I've heard that mentioned even by people that I thought were pretty solid, and I'm like, you might be joking, but now you're making me think. Like, now you're making me wonder, if everything went really, really bad, can I trust you? And that's where, like, said, some of these people I've known in the military have said that type of situation, that type of thought is where they come to the conclusion, some of these guys I served with, I would not want to be around in that situation, because I know that they don't have those foundational core values, and they would be willing to do whatever they had to do.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I can wholeheartedly give my assent that I would say the same thing for guys who were in my unit.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know you served. What'd you serve in?
I was in the Air Guard. So just
Okay.
traditional guardsman my whole career. Um, it was a good time. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. No, and you see that. We like to kind of believe the best of people, especially people that are defending our country. So we don't acknowledge it entirely consciously all the time. But if those people weren't there, there wouldn't be a need for court martials and stuff like that. So they definitely exist. And my brother actually put it this way. So my brother served, and he's now a pastor. So we get to have a lot of these cool conversations. And he put it the way where he's like, I think the most effective unit on earth would be a group of Christian men, convicted Christian men, with basically no holds barred. You just give them what they need, tell them the mission, let them act on their convictions, and you'd be better off than any other unit. And I was like, you might be something to that. And he has some, I guess I'll say, interesting combat experience. So he definitely has some reason to hold those views. But yeah, I think that we both kind of agree on that point. Kind of concludes, seems like to me,
Yeah.
that topic.
Yeah. I mean, there's a thousand directions. Like I said, any of this could go. So, yeah, for sure.
But
you can get real theological.
that actually, I guess I'll build on it one more. That actually does point out the need to go over the what ifs. Here's a what if I'll throw at you. So Christian principles in extreme circumstances. I asked somebody in my church about this, and because we've been talking about the whole prepping thing, and my church has actually been somewhat proactive on the prepping side of things, which is pretty cool. Because I believe it's Christian responsibility. Anyways, my thought was, if you had a group of Christians who were well prepared and well stocked for whatever comes, and things go sideways, whether it's, like you said, natural disaster, civil collapse, or whatever, say they have enough food to last them for 2 years, and there's no end in sight for the situation, so you really might need that amount of food. But because people know that you're Christians and know that you are clearly not as dire of a situation as they are, you have people kind of lining up asking for charity, which Christians do, right? So what's the Christian responsibility in that circumstance? To go, I have this body of believers that we've prepared a certain amount for, to go and protect and preserve those people, but we also have the Christian responsibility of serving others,
Yeah.
And it's like, man, I almost even want to do a study on Christian history and just be like, people who've been in similar situations, how have they had to respond?
That would be a very interesting study. So I love church history. I eat that stuff up. I'm not going to claim like I'm a scholar or super well read. I've read some, and I just love to listen to it. Yeah, because I think there's good history there, right? That the world has been around for a while, and people have been around for a while. So have Christians, and unfortunately, dire circumstances are not anything, unique to 5,000-year-old events.
They're actually the norm.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing that comes to mind, and this is definitely, this is a nuanced, that's a tough question. And, I think any answer you give too, there's so many things that you could think about, so many what ifs of what if you feel like you're being taken advantage of, or what if somebody that's asking for your charity is then taking your resources and selling them, or whatever. There's so many things you could throw in that would make it even harder. But generally speaking, one of the things I think about is in very early on in the church, when most Christians were either Jews in the Roman Empire or slaves, Gentile slaves. That was a large, well, Jew and Gentile slaves. Large number of the Christian population were slaves. Many of them were very poor, didn't have a lot. But some of the very early writings from the Romans at the time and the Greeks, they talk about how Christians are known for taking in unwanted infants who were cast out, because infanticide was common in that time, just like it is now, different forms. And those people were not well off. So while they may not have been, out in the wilderness with no means of survival, they weren't living large. So, I kind of think that the general Christian principle is of you should extend yourself and give out of your, don't just give out of your abundance, give even in your need. I think that would definitely apply to a situation like this. But then when it comes to threats of violence, and if you're responsible for defending a small community and there's people who are making threats, I mean, it definitely, where do your priorities come down to as well once you start having people who might be starving or sick yourself? And that's definitely tricky. You'd hope your pastor would be there so you could defer those questions to him.
Right? Yeah, I'm not qualified. Sorry.
Protect the pastor at all costs.
Right.
No, I'm just
I don't have the degree. Ask that guy.
Yeah. But that's the thing though, is if you have no foundation for your worldview, if your worldview is pragmatism, or if you're a moral relativist like most people are, then the sky is the limit. I mean,
anything goes.
What are you going to do? Well, how far are you pushed?
Yep.
And human nature is human nature, Christian or not Christian. Desperation affects all of us. But I would challenge anyone who says, Christian beliefs are going to go by the wayside, to look in history a little bit and see some of the things that Christians have done for their principles.
Yeah.
But that's a good question.
It's tough. I've thought about it a decent bit, and I'm like, man, you'd really have to, I think, like you said, you'd have to come up with a system to make sure you weren't being taken advantage of, to hold people accountable too. So like, hey, yeah, we'll give you this initially, like to help you make it. But if you're going to keep coming back, like there has to be a relationship here. Like you don't get the benefits of the church without building that relationship or becoming part of the church or contributing to the church or something like that, So in that type of a situation, there's obviously going to be a lot of physical labor involved and a lot of responsibilities. So you've got, eventually, like early on in our country's history, you see these Christian people coming up with principles like, hey, you don't work, you don't eat. Like there's charity, but there's also accountability. So I've thought about that. Like, man, I definitely want to do a study on when churches have been put in extreme circumstances, and the decisions they've been called to make, how they responded.
Well, I've got one for you, since you have, soon to have a few kids. Here's something I've thought about, and this is backtracking a little bit back to priorities and sort of where you invest your thought, like also your time. Is like I'm not fully geared up yet, but I've got some stuff that I want to have. So I certainly have sustainment ability for field craft type things. And even a little bit extra. I've got some food storage, and I know people love to talk about bug out versus bug in, and I'm not trying to nerd out about that. But I think sometimes in the romanticism of this stuff, if you're a single guy, like piece of cake, like grab your stuff, think about how much you can carry, and go for it.
You basically get an extended vacation.
Right.
No bills. Like, yeah, I get to go out and live in the woods. Cool.
But if you have, let's just say, for the sake of this hypothetical, right? No more gasoline or EMP, whatever, right? And you have to go somewhere with your family, whether that's to cousin, brother's house because they have more food, they're further out in the country, whatever it is. You have to go somewhere on foot. Like, okay. Like, it's not just me, a 20-something-year-old guy. It's, my wife, I have a dog. What do you do with your dog? Do you just leave your dog behind? Or do you bring him? Maybe that's an easy question for some people. It's something to think about. And then kids.
My dog looks
right?
pretty mean, so I would definitely be taking.
I mean, I'm set up pretty well to have a chest rig, a belt on, and a 72-hour pack at the same time. But I've not factored in carrying a baby.
Right.
She's gonna have to go somewhere. My 2-year-old's is not gonna be hustling through the woods with me. So like some of those situations, and the more you think about that, the more awful and desperate it gets. You got to travel 10 miles. Like, what's your wife gonna carry? All that stuff, and never mind like
That's
a 2-year-old, an infant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might be why you see. I'm trying to remember if I've actually seen historical accounts of this, or if it's mostly just theatrical, which probably is rooted in some degree of reality, where not everybody goes. The man leaves, and he has to go get what he needs to get, and he comes back because, just like you're saying, logistically, and as far as the amount of energy spent, that would actually be easier to execute. Even if just purely from a caloric standpoint, you have one person spending calories and a light load getting to your sustainment or resupply or whatever you want to call it, and then having to exert that energy bringing it back is probably still lower than the amount that you would spend trying to move. For me, it's going to be another adult and three small children. That would be tough. And that's actually, I've seen people talking about mules and horses and stuff. And like, if you're really getting into the homesteading and the preparedness, like to that degree, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, they make food out of almost anything, and they can go a long while. It makes sense why that was such a necessity for people in the past before electric and gas engines.
Right. Well, I mean, we're talking about this. It makes sense. That's why people used to do it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be actually, I know you mentioned Dirty Civilian before. That kind of correlates with their whole dirt biking video too.
Yeah.
Like sustainment dirt bikes. If I needed to go get something, that would be a lot easier getting there and back than taking a family somewhere.
I go for a sustainment mule.
Yeah. I would go I mean, even if you just have a homestead and you're trying to keep predators away, those things will be mean to anything that they are not familiar with. And I like that.
Yeah, I used to help out. One of my pastors was taught natural horsemanship and had a ranch, and
that's good.
I helped out enough to know that I am not a horse guy. So
I love horses.
That said, I would probably love horses a whole lot more if there was no such thing as automobiles or working tractors and heavy equipment. So
yeah,
I see their value. They would, if you were the one with the horses, you could take your family anywhere you want.
my wife says guess mules are next on the list.
Oh yeah. My wife and I were talking about this. Honestly, I mean, there's a lot of benefits to mules. If only the poor things could reproduce, then I would start breeding mules right now.
Right. Yeah. No, they're definitely amazing. They would be an amazing asset in a situation like that. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love horses. I grew up. I lived on the same property as my grandpa for a long time, and he had 2 horses for almost 30 years. They lived a super long time, and they were alive for almost my whole life. The last one just passed away a couple of years ago. And we got a lot of time in on those. And that was awesome. And like you're saying, 100 years ago, you didn't have a choice really but to have a basic understanding of horses. Or let's say 150 years ago, because now we're kind of getting out there. You didn't have a choice. Even if you were a pretty well-off individual, you probably had a basic understanding of horses. And to expand on that, there's other principles as well, that people just had natural skills because of the environment they were in. Probably some hunting or some firearms experience or some, self-defense, things like that. The men especially had to know how to do those things. And that's part of my passion for this stuff, is that a return to that ideology that, like, we should have a baseline. Like, the average man should understand, even if you don't like it, even if you're an artist, even if you're, more into, I don't know, the frilly things in life, I guess, you should still have an understanding of some basic principles like self-defense, obviously just hard work, and things like that, so that if circumstances ever call on you, you can answer. And it goes back to that old quote, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Like, I just want to see men have a little bit more of that foundational capacity again.
Yeah. I think Mike Jones, I don't know why I default call him by his real name, Garen Thumb. Anyway,
the first time you said that in messaging, I was like, who is that? I was like, is that Grant Thumb? I was like Googling it real quick. I was like, oh yeah, that's Grant Thumb.
I think because when it comes down to it, when I start talking to another like actual person, it's like, oh, this is all just internet names anyway. So there's a person behind it. But anyway, when he talks about some of his survival stuff, I would like the way he says that he wants to get more people back to the level of a 9-year-old from the 1800s. Just like you were saying, foundational skills, like
the Boy Scouts.
Right? Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the point. You're totally right. I think it's very easy. We were just talking about priorities for, us all to say, you should own this, you should do this, you should whatever. But I'm really careful when I say I think somebody needs to be able to. But one of the things is, I think every adult human being needs to be able to know what to do if they see somebody passed out, bleeding in a car accident. I'm no medical guru. I was an EMT for a bit, first aid and other stuff. And I just worked for a small private ambulance company. So I did more transport calls than anything. It wasn't like super cool 911 trauma stuff. But I've run into more trauma or emergencies outside of work and outside of my time being an EMT than when I was in. And just having not even so much that like all my individual skills are top notch, but even just having an understanding of what to do so you're not panicking and you're thinking clearly. I think that's something every adult should be able to do. Yeah. And in times past, a lot of these types of things, I'm not saying everyone was a medical guru, but home remedies, what to do if someone sprains an ankle, like people were more aware of a lot of this stuff for sure.
Yeah, because you had to be. If you sprained an ankle and you were, on your 15-mile walk to wherever, you had to either know how to deal with it and get where you needed to go, or to treat it. Or like you said, if somebody in your family is moving, you gotta know how to deal with that stuff. Actually, my next video touches on this a little bit. I just filmed it. I haven't edited it yet. And I think you're 100% right, because actually, I think, I've still got them here from the video. So I was doing research because as I do these steps, I'm trying to prioritize things like very technically, like logically, like there's a reason behind why this is step 1 and this is step 5. And I was like, what are people most likely to suffer? Like, we hear everybody needs a tourniquet, but how likely are you actually to need to use a tourniquet? So I looked up all of these numbers and I was super surprised because, so here for an example, I was going to put fire extinguishers next on the list, because I was like, if you don't have fire extinguishers, you need to have fire extinguishers. Like, I've talked to people and been like, do you have fire extinguishers extinguishers in your house? No. Well, why do you feel prepared if you have a gun then? Because you're more likely to suffer, something catching on fire than to need to use a gun. But I started looking at the numbers. And I don't remember where I got all of these from except for the one. But they said fires, flame, and smoke kill like 3,400 people a year. And people that bleed out every year, 60,000. And I was like, you're telling me that you have like 20 times the chance of bleeding out than you do dying in a house fire? Like, I had a house burned down. Like, I've experienced that. Like, it blew my mind that was less likely to happen than somebody bleeding out. Now, this is a little bit, the statistics are a little weird the way that they overlap, and it's hard to be honest with statistics. But so I was looking at like, wow, you're way more likely to die from blood loss than murder, to die from blood loss than motor vehicle. But actually, some of these overlap.
Right.
So like some of the blood loss deaths account for some of the motor vehicle deaths and some of the murder deaths, obviously. But even choking, like people choking to death, way lower than people bleeding out. So like, okay, yeah, tourniquet, IFAK it is.
Yeah.
That's should be, like you said, everybody should know, one, how to do it, and two, that a makeshift tourniquet really is usually does a pretty ineffective job unless you really know what you're doing.
Unless you make it right. And at that point, if you're so prepared to make a makeshift tourniquet, you might as well just buy a real one.
Exactly. I think it was a Stop the Bleed video I was watching where he mentioned that at the Boston Marathon attack, they had, obviously was mostly makeshift tourniquets to get all these people to hospitals, and they found out that the ineffective rate was like 80% for makeshift tourniquets. So that was where I was like, okay, now I have some ammo for the people that are like, I'll just use my belt, I'll just use my shirt. It's like, well, have you ever trained in how to do that? No, right. I've seen it on a movie once. Like, no, like that,
it's better than nothing, to be sure. But if you need a tourniquet, if you have arterial bleeding or heavy venous bleeding, and
some of those, even one tourniquet might not be enough. Like you might have to tourniquet that thing and pack it. Or
for sure.
I know who was, I'm gonna blank on his name now. Son of a gun, the Green Beret who lost his leg and ended up making it back into his ODA.
I've probably seen that guy. I don't know his name.
Yeah, I forget his name. I'm reading his book right now. And when he was treating his own leg, he got shot with the RPK, I think it was, something like that. He had his first tourniquet on. I think he passed out, woke up, realized that it was ineffective, that he was still bleeding out. So then he packed the wound and put another tourniquet on top of the wound packing. And then he passed out again. And he did an effective job because he ended up living. But like, that freaked me out because I was like, oh, geez, like we think, tourniquet, kind of the fix all. Oh, I've got a tourniquet, I'm okay. Like, no, you got to put that thing on the right way, and then you got to make sure that it's working. Like,
right, yeah, putting it on the right way in the right position is huge. High and tight, get it as tight as you can before you start cinching the windlass. Make sure there's nothing, if possible, between the person, skin, and not their skin, but just some clothing is fine. But if they get stuff in their pockets, like that's going to affect it. There's this scared me, and this is probably going to scare you even more. I was hiking with a guy. I met up with a group of dudes a few months ago, and one of these guys is an EMT in Massachusetts. Actually works in the same area that I used to work. He was telling me they responded to a call. It was a construction site, and I'm not going to tell the story perfectly, but more or less this is what it was. A piece of sheet metal fell and landed on both thighs on this guy, and sheet metal, it's nasty stuff. If it comes at you, it's bad. So it got like halfway through the guy's thigh, and I don't think he had taken it out. Maybe he tried to or something. Anyway, he was bleeding like crazy. So he was a big dude too. I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna get the number right, but they talked about how they were just slapping tourniquets on, out of their ambulance. So they have probably some with them, a couple in their bags, usually a few extras. It was like 4 tourniquets before they finally got the guy who's bleeding slowed down. And I want to say the fire department showed up or cops, and they put on more tourniquets. So
Yeah.
that's an extreme case,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I will say,
Yeah.
I will say though, that when you first brought up the ground level Second Amendment preparedness, this was like the first thing that came to my mind, was just like that survive mentality that like, I don't know, something you can't really teach people. They have to find it, is like that, I guess, yeah, just survive mentality, like that make it mentality. There was a guy in my church when I was growing up. He had a wooden leg and no hand, and he was just an old farmer, right? And 2 times throughout his life with farming equipment, he lost a limb. And both times he was out in the field by himself. The one with his leg, this is before cell phones and stuff, was able to treat himself, get himself to his house, call on the landline, and pass out in the living room. They came and fortunately saved his life. But that was just like how many people today would just be like, oh, my leg's gone. Oh, well, like that's it.
Yeah, you pretty much just follow.
Whereas this guy was like, yeah, like, no, I am crawling to the house. Like, this is not my day. And so as much as I was just like, yeah, don't do makeshift tourniquets, like there's also part of the mentality that is just like, you have to refuse to lose.
Right.
And then you were talking about multiple tourniquets. I know a guy who, when he was in Afghanistan, he had, I think, 6 tourniquets on one person at one point, and that was from a IED. But yeah, there's like, you probably, I know there's, and I have my own qualms with this, the whole two is one is none.
Yeah.
But to a degree, you really need to be able to reassess your work and then reapply or readdress if you need to.
Yeah. Well, it's like everything else that we were saying earlier. You know, if I could, if I could drop 180 bucks or whatever, yeah, on and feel good about it doing that on like 6 more tourniquets right now, I would have tourniquets everywhere, and you know, eventually I'll probably get there. But you know, if you got some gauze and you can get one $30 tourniquet, that's the ground level. You know, that's your
Yep.
that's your entry.
Or
Um,
if you're like me, you buy a whole lot of tourniquets because you have a group of people that are interested in buying, and then like half of them flake. So then you just have a whole bunch of extra tourniquets laying around.
Even better. Yeah, that's good. Oh man, so every time you say something or we bring up something, I have like 6 other ideas of things that I want to ask you about or whatever that come to mind. But I don't want to go too far off because otherwise, what does Instagram cut it off at an hour or
Oh, I don't even
we
remember.
might I don't know, we might be close.
Oh yeah,
Um,
we're at 4:59 right now, so we've got a couple minutes.
okay. Well, I'll real quick, let's see if we get cut off or not here. Um, here's a question I've got for you. Well, actually, I'll scratch that. You know what? We'll do this first. Prevail Armament.
Yep.
That's your company, right?
Yep.
I just want to give you a minute to talk about, you know, what it is, what you're doing, what's the mission.
Yeah, so we're passionate about equipping the average person. Um, the way I worded it in our intro video is we want to provide the information, the knowledge, the gear, and the philosophy necessary to prevail in the world we find ourselves in today. So it's pretty broad, but I am really passionate about making the individual capable so that they can contribute to community readiness. And actually, so I had that in my bio like for the last year, and then Dirty Civilian came out with their mission statement, and I was like, oh, son of a gun! Like that's right what I wanted to say. So now I'm trying to think of something that's not exactly what they said, but I really enjoy teaching foundational stuff. I really enjoy teaching new individuals because I love seeing somebody that the day before or the week before had absolutely no capability in this category, and now they're somewhat equipped. Like, I think if we could do that with the top 4 or 5 areas with everyone, then the world would be a much better place.
Nice.
That's pretty much it. I could rant about it forever, but I haven't actually had to do what's the company about before. So you got the first one.
Well, good off the cuff answer. Nice. Yeah, I'm excited to see what kind of stuff you do down the road. It sounds like maybe we should do a chat again sometime.
Yeah, I'd be up for that.
I don't know if we'll get cut off here. So at the risk of us getting cut off, I'll see if we can go for one more thing. What do you think?
Yeah, go for it.
So here's something I've been thinking a whole lot about. I have my own answer. I want to hear yours. How far do you think you should go with your training?
As far as you can. as far as it doesn't violate other responsibilities or values. It's not a one size fits all answer because certain people have everybody's circumstances are different. Um, but part of this is that I'm a student forever. Like there's always going to be something that I could be better equipped for. There's always going to be something that I could, be a little bit more ready to address. Um, but like you said, you need to prioritize getting the situations sorted out that you are the most likely to suffer. And then move on from there. What's your answer?
Well, in short, first part is same thing as far as you can. I have a little bit of like a bipolar beyond that because there's a part of me that says you should only do what is the utmost priority, right? Like you were saying, and I think generally that's my answer. However, there's also a part of me that says, like, not for nothing, but most of us think this stuff is fun, and
Exactly.
so I think when you have opportunities to, like, there's a measure of how much I treat this like a serious pursuit, whether that's shooting, field craft, lifting, rucking, tactics, whatever. And then there's also a measure of me that admits that at the end of the day, like, I think it's fun. So
Yeah.
there's a small part of me too that would, I've got some guys at church, and for some of the younger teenagers, we might buy them real cheap airsoft guns and go and do it kind of as like a youth recreation thing. If we do that, I'm absolutely going to teach them how to J-hook and button hook and all that good stuff, and proper spacing and column or line formation and whatever. And it's like kind of what you were saying at the beginning of this. That's sort of you're hitting multiple things doing that. And yeah, like walking in formations and clearing rooms might be so far like beyond ground level for priorities, but hey, if you can do it, do it.
If it gets them interested in seeing like what they can get into, then it's absolutely worth it. Yeah. And
yeah,
I do have, like you said, there's kind of a bipolar to it where, yes, I admit that this stuff is fun. I like being out in the woods. I like the community of training with guys. But at the same time, I've had some people be like, well, you're a gun guy, you know this. And I'm like, I'm really not a gun guy. I trained martial arts way before I was ever into guns. And if we only had spears, I would be a spear guy. If we only had bow and arrows, I would be a bow and arrow guy, because it's not about that item. Like, do I think they're cool? Yeah. Am I the kind of guy that wants one of everything and, is super into all the different models and makes and whatever? Like, no, except for maybe a choice few historical ones I would be interested in. But I'm not really a gun guy, so to speak. When I think a gun guy, I think the guy that has his safe full of all the different kind of guns, probably can't shoot any of them worth anything, and doesn't have enough ammo for any value made by any of them. That's not me. I'm a self-defense and preparedness guy. I'm a fulfilling your duty. The way that I word it in Prevail Armament a lot is fulfilling the roles and responsibilities bestowed on you by God. So that's what I'm about. It would be the same thing 200 years ago. It would just be different tools. So
yeah, I like the way you said that. Also, I just checked. Apparently, we got 4 hours. So
yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I have 4 hours, but we get a few minutes, maybe another like 15 or so. Does that sound good to you?
Whatever you've got, man. I good to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the way you said that. That's kind of how I feel about it. If someone gave me every decked out Gucci gun, would I shoot them and enjoy it? Definitely. But I like seeing progress and improvement in things. So I like the idea that I have, I'll have 4 guns and I want to know how to shoot all of them really well. I want them to all be purpose built and, be rock solid as best as I can have. And that's kind of how I think about it. And you're right. Like if guns weren't a thing, okay, fine. Like, how good can I get at throwing axes or, bows or whatever.
America's first everyday carry.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I
So
definitely gravitate towards when we're at league and stuff. There's the guys who have the decked out guns and everything, and honestly, I see that stuff and I'm just like, okay. Now I know a guy, and some people, if they listen to this, will know who I'm talking about if they go to my league. There's a guy who shoots a completely stock Glock, and he's always like top three. I want to hang out with that guy.
yeah,
You know, you can do all the Gucci stuff and all the upgrades and whatever, but if you're not running as fast as he is, I want to hang out with him. That's way cooler to me. I want to, I guess I've always been about that.
yeah,
And it kind of goes towards the theme that we've been talking about this whole time, because people ask, well, what equipment do I need? What gear do I need? What whatever. And my brother put it this way a couple times. He would rather have the men around him that have the correct ideology and very little gear, rather than have the people that are all geared up and have these abysmal or just complete lack of your ideology or worldview.
yeah,
And even more so, like, we were talking about budget gear. I asked one of my buddies who is a fairly experienced combat guy. I'll put it that way. I was like, "Hey, what chest rig should I get at the time?" And he was like, "I don't know. Condor is good." I was like, "What do you mean Condor? Like, that's the joke of the gun community." And he's like, "Well, can you afford everything that your chest rig needs to carry?" I was like, not at the moment, no. He goes, "So what's the point of the nylon if you can't afford to fill it?" He's like, "The stuff that it carries is the important part. Like, the nylon is nylon." And I was like, "Okay, that's a pretty solid view." And
yeah,
he pointed out, he's like, well, actually, I referred to him in a conversation with another friend where I was like, "I'd rather have," we'll just call him Bob. I was like, "I would rather have 5 Bobs decked out in Palmetto State Armory and Condor gear than have, 5 guys that have all this Gucci gear and really don't know how to use it."
yeah.
So there's a balancing act there. But again, sounds like you're in the same boat, where it's more about function than about, the status of the item.
Yeah, and there's room for improvement. I think that's the thing. Like the way I think about it is, and I just making content and stuff, but I want people to get exposure to. I think of it like rungs in the ladder. Currently, most of what's put out on the internet is like the top rung in the ladder. Lucas Botkin, Garen Thumb, administrative results, whoever it is, whether it's for what they're putting out as far as the gear they're showing or the skills they're showing. And that's what's like really popular, obviously for good reason. But I think the problem is, like, most people aren't a couple steps below on the ladder. Like, most of us are at the bottom rung, so I think the way I look at it is, if I can get myself and my family and future generations and the people around me up a couple more rungs in the ladder, that's what's most important to me. Yeah, it'd be great to just go all the way to the top of the ladder. But I think being realistic, like, that's not where most people belong. So yeah, I think I think of it like, get into something at the lowest. And I think with your different steps that you're having in your videos right now, you're really hitting on this, is especially when you talked about emergency fund, like Dave Ramsey.
I'm super passionate about that.
Love Dave Ramsey stuff. And he'll say, have a 6-month emergency fund. And like, that's great. But before you have a 6-month emergency fund, you know what you can have is a 1 week or a 2 week or a 3 week emergency fund. There's nothing and then something great. So maybe
unless you, some people I will give the exclusion to. If you just have too much stuff, if you can get a 6 month worth emergency fund by selling some stuff, sell some stuff.
Oh yeah.
Get the emergency.
Yeah, there's so many nuances to this. Some people do need to just learn how to budget, and then they could afford the gear. You know, some people, maybe your job doesn't pay well enough, you need to do something to get a better job. Some people, maybe you're doing all the right things, and you just got to get what you can get for now, and then improve it later. Yeah. And I think that's what I really like about the stuff you're putting out, is I think it's encouraging people to do that, which in a way is letting you know it's okay that you're here, but I'm not saying you should stay here. You know, you're pushing people to do more. You just it's like those videos and posts. You know, you just see more and more people be like, oh, if you don't have a red dot on your pistol in 2023, like, you know, you're not combat effective. Or if you don't have night vision, once you have night vision, you don't have a way to active aim with a laser. You know, and oh, well, if you don't have a way to active and passive aim, you're at a mismatch. And it's like, that's true. Yeah, I'm also at, you know, you're also at a mismatch against a group of guys who have no full-time job and can train all day, or mismatch against somebody who has no training and terrible gear but has 30 buddies. Like, So anyway.
Yeah. So this goes back to the morality side of things we were talking about. But I do know some really, really dangerous guys, really, really experienced dangerous guys who don't have night vision, and they plan on just acquiring it when the circumstances arise. And there's something to be said about that. Like, again, I'm more scared of that guy than the dude who has whatever. And I even made a post about it. If you look far enough back, there's some night vision shots, and I was using a Gen 3, like lower tier Gen 3 PVS 14 from as I referred to him, a crusty OIF vet that I know. And he, I was like, I'm way more afraid of this guy because I know him personally. I know what this dude's capable of. I know how hard he works every single day, you know, just all about him. I'm like, I'm way more afraid of this guy with some outdated NVGs than the dude, you know, Instagram influencer guy running around with panos on.
Yeah.
For sure. So I think that goes back to that mentality like we were talking about. It's definitely function over gear. Or I heard, actually, was it you? Somebody mentioned to me recently the Indian and the arrow. It's way more the Indian than it is the arrow.
Oh, that's good. No, I can't take credit for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did we get on that? I kind of sidetracked there.
We were just talking about, you know, gear and
the stuff.
You know,
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's just good to see more people who are a little bit more like average Joes, you know, making this stuff. And again, it's not that it's all about like settling and not being better. Like, you're clearly dedicated to what you do, and you're passionate about people being more prepared and more skilled. You know, it's just the kind of rubber meets the road approach, I think of it. And not that there isn't a value in, you know, T-Rex arms and Garand thumb. Like, that's, again, the Overton window, right? It's moving what people are seeing. They're seeing high standards. People aren't just mag dumping or plinking. You know, they're saying, oh, this is possible. So that's going to bring the bottom level up. But I think there's other ways to do that too. And there's a huge gap for people to do that. So yeah, just really glad to see that you're doing what you're doing. And
thanks.
I hope we get more of an opportunity to interact. I gotta organize myself a little bit better, but I have a few more things that I want to do to contribute to that.
So what is your goal with? I see you're putting together the knot tying album, and I gotta check that out because I'm terrible with knots. Like, I just saw a video last week where somebody showed me a new way to tie shoes, and I was like, whoa. So like, what's your goal with that? Are you just doing it for fun, or do you have an end in mind?
That's kind of just, one of those things where I didn't spend 20 years in a combat MOS. I didn't spend 10 years in some intel field where I have, again, a lot of people putting out content here. Like, they can do it, and they can do it and get paid for it because it's worth it, right?
Right.
So my career was kind of like a general communications construction role, and we did tower climbing and tower rescue training, and I was very involved in doing that and teaching that. And I love teaching, and I love tying knots. So it's just something I enjoy, and it's also something that I think is practical. And now that I've seen people starting to really catch on to the whole fieldcraft side of things, which I love, I'm like, oh shoot, well, there's a lot of how-tos as far as like how do you actually tie the steps, but there's a little bit less about application. And I remember this is kind of like what really made me want to teach it and put out these how-tos is you ever heard of Civil Air Patrol?
What was it?
Civil Air Patrol.
No.
It's like ROTC basically, except instead of affiliating with a school, it's there's just units around. It's all volunteer and stuff. So I did that, and when I was a cadet, I got to go to this course that was they had career orientations for Air Force jobs, and they had a basic
where you get to work on planes and stuff. Like you hang out at airfields with the
kind of. It's like ROTC, so drill, physical fitness, leadership.
So it's a little bit more structured. Okay.
Rescue. It was an awesome program. I would recommend it to anyone. But you could go into these career orientations, and they had a basic and an advanced pararescue orientation course. So for like, I don't know, do you know what pararescue is? Okay, yes. So Air Force SOF guys, and so it was a course taught by them and SEER guys, and they just take you up in the mountains and smoke you and teach you about land nav and fieldcraft and knot tying and stuff. And the advanced course gets
sounds like so much fun.
Cool guy stuff. That was best thing, cooler than anything I did in the real military, and it kind of like ruined it for me because it was great. But we had to learn how to tie a set of like 5 knots, and we were checking them constantly. We had to tie them to like a time standard. And they had to have safeties in the end and be dressed properly and everything. And that was like a requirement to pass that course. So it's like I saved up money as a high school kid to go to that course. So I didn't want to fail that thing. I wanted to go to the advanced course. So I remember just being so stressed about it. And it's like, cool, I tied all these knots. I got it done. And then at the end of it, I was like, what do I use these for? Right. So for me, like when I went on to the Air Force and had some overlap with using knots in my career field, I really wanted to teach guys not just like the what and how, but the why. So I would do as much as I could to explain it. So that's kind of like just passing on info. Again, I don't have a wealth of knowledge or anything. I get a little bit on something, and knots is one of them.
I've gotten on kicks before where I've watched knot tying videos because some of them are just super satisfying. Like you can definitely scroll through some of those knot tying pages and just be like mesmerized. But there was a few where I was like, oh, these are super handy. And I would learn them. And I'd be like, there are situations I can know this in. And then like, I have really bad memory. But anytime I was like, oh, I can use that knot, I was like, I have no idea how to do this. So like, just really, if it was something that I was really going to add to my, skills, I would have to really rehearse them and do them pretty often to stay up on that.
The good thing I will say about knots is that like shooting is a perishable skill. Knot tying, I would say, is a little bit more like swimming, where there is a perishability to it, but once you really get it into your head, it doesn't fade quite as much. So like I'm teaching myself a couple knots right now that I want to know better, that I never really used. And if I don't keep up with them, I'm going to forget them. But once like what I consider the basics, the ones that I've tied for years, I can go, I'll tie them for months, and you can put a gun up to my head and blindfold me, and I can tie them behind my back. And so there's definitely a level where once you really get it, it doesn't go away because it's just a fine, pure motor skill.
Yeah, I've got to get some more of those added to my skills. The fieldcraft side of things is my least experienced, like interestingly, because I've done a decent bit of hunting. So like I'm comfortable in the cold. Up here it gets really cold in the winter. You gotta have that figured out to be able to hunt, in January. But as far as like, I suck at starting fires. I'll be the first guy to say that. Like, not good at it. If anything's wet, like, just I'll go through a box of matches and I'll just be angry and wet and cold. So I've really, that's this summer, that's one of the things we're trying to focus on is building up some of those foundational skills. Like you said, that probably everybody should know. I could probably just learn from the Boy Scouts on that one. And knot tying would be another really good one for me to add to the being able to do for the sake of fieldcraft and stuff like that. I like that a lot. Have you ever done any martial arts?
Yeah, nowhere near as much as I wish. It was something I always wanted to get into, and I just never did until when I deployed. My team leader was he did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and
Yes.
he was a meathead. He and I were always in the gym together. So I was like, hey, when we deploy, like, will you teach me? He was like, oh yeah. So I got super into it.
Good.
When I was overseas, I was rolling like 4 times a week. I joined a MMA gym for a bit when I first got back, but it fell by the wayside. So I haven't done it for a long time.
Yeah.
I didn't even have a white belt. I loved it. I got to learn from some cool, like really good people too for a little while. But yeah,
that's we were talking about foundational skills. I think one of the best things parents can do for their kids is to have them experience in some sort of martial art, because and like a good one too, not like some not really applicable, won't work in real life, doesn't actually challenge you to work under pressure kind of a martial art. I mean, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Krav Maga, good mixed martial arts place, some karate places, but really those top main 3, or wrestling is probably one of the top ones that's
wrestling
most acceptable. Because learning base, your stance, and learning how, just familiarity with your body, how to use your body. You don't realize how unfamiliar people are with their body until you start instructing brand new people at martial arts or at weightlifting. You'll be like, yeah, you got to, engage your pecs, flex your pecs, and people are just like, I don't know how to do that. Like, so I think of all these topics that we've talked about, I'm pretty heavy on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's one of my, not personally as far as time spent, but as far as what I recommend to people, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is top of the list. I have a history with karate and mixed martial arts, but that's a different discussion. I really think that those transfer into so many areas, just being able to move, being agile, being comfortable under pressure, like you mentioned, people being able to think in an emergency. Those aren't really skills that you can just be like, okay, like for my list, all right, step 6, you need to learn how to work under pressure. Like, what? And maybe that is a consideration. Maybe I don't know. I've never looked into it in the way of being like, what drills or training can somebody do outside of martial arts or those types of things to train working under pressure? Because that's one of the biggest things. If you freeze, if somebody needs a tourniquet and you have a tourniquet, you have all your kit, and you freeze, all that gear meant nothing anyways. So I'm glad to hear that you're into it.
If I could get, sooner or later, like, I'll try to convince some of the guys from church to go all, quarters in on a set of mats or something, and then I'll probably get trashed by the 5'4" guy who wrestled in high school. But
it's rough when you that was a wake-up call. So I'll just real quick, I did karate, and then I was part of a mixed martial arts school later on towards the end of high school and into college. And that first time you just get dumped by a wrestler, you're like, oh, I know how to strike, right? And you just get tossed. You're just like, your whole world is just like, what is happening?
And they're never it's not like Like if you see someone from a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background, they're very smooth, very like decisive. A wrestler is just gonna like try to pound you into the ground, and it's gonna happen in a quarter of a second.
It's super explosive, and like you're going up against a wrestler, you need to know how to work under pressure. And what sucks even worse is when you have a wrestler who learned Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So then their foundation is just like, if they're on top, you just can't move them, and it's terrible.
That's like the unfair advantage. I guess the last 10 minutes here are just going to be MMA Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu talk. That's cool with me. But one of the guys that I was learning from when I was deployed, he was just some random dude they had a class that actually the chaplain at the base I was on was teaching the class, and he was like this beanpole skinny wiry guy, but he was like tough. He spent a lot of time attached to like SOF units, and he was like wicked cool guy, like hardcore biblical Presbyterian chaplain, like one of the few chaplains that I've ever met that I really looked up to and thought wasn't a sellout. But yeah, he was tough. So he was teaching the class, but there's this other random dude there who came, and I actually got to see him roll with a couple MMA fighters who came out and did like a USO thing, like a Q&A, and then grapple with the MMA fighter thing. This guy was like brutal. And his background, going back to the wrestling thing, is his dad like pushed him to wrestle all through high school, and then he got into MMA. So he did things that like I was glad I got to learn a lot from him, because like it made me more aggressive.
Yeah.
And instead of just trying to like pull guard and fight from guard, like I would try to take a little bit more of an advantage. Of that.
They're tough. That is for sure. And you don't know like physical exhaustion until you've done a wrestling camp. Like their physical fitness is just as absurd. So yeah, if we're talking about setting foundations for all these other skills that we like to talk about, I fully believe in getting people into martial arts early. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is better for adults who are foreign to fitness and training. Some of the other ones can be just a little bit too intense as far as that goes. But yeah, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is awesome. I think
you're making me want to get that.
I have a set of mats, and they're just sitting in the basement.
I'll rent.
And every once in a while, what's that?
I was just kidding. I was saying I'll rent them from you.
Oh yeah,
my wife. I have too many things going on already.
Right. Yeah, that's where I'm at. As I've had people be like, "Hey, when are you going to start training martial arts again?" And I'm like, I don't have time for it right now. And then just this last time I trained with a handful of guys, we got in the same conversation about how beneficial martial arts is. And one of the guys texted me. He's like, "So when are we starting up martial arts training?" And I was like, don't do that to me. But
yeah. Well, it's like everything. There's seasons. Sometimes you can afford to do certain things, or you have the time for it, and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
But
100%.
Speaking of seasons, I should probably get back to helping out around the house.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me. Well, I guess I technically had you on, but it was all your idea, and you outlined everything. So thanks for that, man. I really was glad to do this. It was cool. Normally, when people first start to follow, they're not as interactive and interested. And as soon as you followed me and sent me a message, I was like, "Oh, this is cool."
Well, I saw a Christian guy who seemed like he was from a Reformed background, who was hitting on a message that I think is sorely lacking in this space, and I was like, "Oh, all day."
Yep.
We can talk theology and the Second Amendment some other time, maybe.
Yeah. Was it you that had Soli Deo Gloria in your bio?
Yes.
And I was just like, I'm a simple man. I see Soli Deo Gloria and I follow.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
Probably a pretty good bet. So.
But yeah, let's definitely talk again sometime. I will be trying to do my best to share your page, and I'll be following closely what you have going on.
Thank you.
Someday when I get my act together too, I will be probably doing more than just posting Instagram videos, but not yet.
I hear you. Yep, we gotta work up for that stuff. Yeah, I think I have. Oh, tomorrow's Friday. If I can spend some time editing tonight, I'll probably be able to put a video out tomorrow. That'll be in regard to some of the things we talked about. So keep an eye out for that. And yeah, I'm excited to see where you take things, and hopefully can help me out with some knot tying.
Sure. Yeah, I'll DM you. We'll get you up to speed. I'll help you.
If I'm ever in the woods and I have reception, I'll just video call you and be like, "Show me what to do."
Right. Send me a clip. How do I do this? Hey, I used to teach. I gotta wrap up, but I used to teach. Drunk E5s. I was there as like this. E3 trying to teach drunk E5s how to tie knots who didn't want to be in a class. So I'm thinking you're probably going to be a better student. So we'll get you good.
I don't know. Don't give me too much credit.
I'm dumb as a rock, so if I can do it, anyone can.
Yeah. You don't seem like it, but all right, man. We'll catch you later.
Catch you later.
Thanks for coming on. All right.
Yeah, for sure. Bye.
All right. Add a guest. Invite to join.
Just sent you an invite. Hey, there you are.
Hey,
Cool.
how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Nice to can't really say meet you, but see you.
I know what you mean. So actually, first things first, I think you know my name, but I don't know yours.
Yeah. So I'm Joshua. Or Josh, either or.
Well, maybe I did see that. That sounds familiar.
I don't put it out on my on this Instagram, but it's no sort of secret either. So
All right, cool. We've got a couple things sorted here. All right. I just sat down, so I'm just going to make sure everything's all set.
yeah, no worries.
All right. I've got a road right behind me on the other side of this wall. So if that gets loud, let me know, and I can move somewhere else.
Yeah, no problem. So far, so good. And we just had some construction finish up outside the house, so we should be good here unless a baby walks in the room.
All right, cool.
Well, hey,
Congratulations, by the way.
thank
That's super exciting.
yeah, and I know you're not far off on yours, so I hope everything goes well with that.
Yeah. Number 3. It's exciting.
Oh, okay. So nice. Yeah, we just had number 2, so we're into the first time for having multiple. So
Good deal. Let me do something. There we go. These lights are a little harsh, so I was just trying to knock it down a bit. So what's
yeah, no worries.
up, man?
Well, I stumbled upon your Instagram a bit ago and just started checking out your posts, and I thought there were a few themes and the things that you hit on that really resonated with me. Obviously, you're an outspoken Christian too, so in this, I'm gonna say community a lot, but I think there's anytime you talk about the Second Amendment or preparedness, I think I have mixed feelings about the word community, but I'll just say community. So in this community,